Let me tell you a story. It's about Osiris and the shiny ones. Long ago, thousands upon thousands of years ago, there were the followers of Horus. And these beings came from the stars. They traveled to Earth through the Orion Gateway. And they were brought here to planet Earth as guides, as facilitators of the Golden Age. And there are several Golden Ages we've experienced on planet Earth. And there are many Dark Ages we've experienced on planet Earth. And these beings, the shiny ones, were highly sophisticated. They brought with them technology. They were engineers and mediums. They understood agriculture, astrology. They understood about the makings of the earth, creation itself. And Osiris was one of these beings. In coming to Earth, there was a great battle, a battle that is still going on today. You can call it a power struggle. The followers of Horus were liberators initially, and then a division happened. As the heart of man was taken away, and without the heart, man could not exist on earth in harmony. The fragmentation of man caused the realms and dimensions to be split, to be disrupted, unnatural, illusionary. And there were these groups. No one knows what they're called, but they're self-preserving. I'm sure you can imagine what that is. A self-preserving being that is obsessed with immortality, eternity, and control. And these self-preserving, self-serving beings became like gods because they were quite knowledgeable. They understood how creation works, just like the followers of Horus knew how creation works. Except these beings did not have a heart. So they were unable to possess a spiritual and emotional connection. They were split, these beings, and somewhat stuck in their immortality, thinking that is natural to fake death, control death. But it made them very unnatural beings. And to us humans, we saw them as gods because they were more sophisticated than us. They were far superior. They understood things that went way over our head. We were like a child compared to these giant beings that understood us more than we did. And yet, they did not have a heart, but they did have a mind. The followers of Horus were these visionaries. They were the spark to every renaissance on this earth that would lead way to the Golden Age. They're like the Einstein or Da Vinci or Tesla. These beings that had such a big heart. And in that heart of theirs, they had spiritual and emotional growth. They had this ethereal completion with time and space, the realms and dimensions. So they were never bound. They were never stuck. They were quite formless. They were this mystic energy. Osiris was one of these blue beings. As the shining ones are always depicted as having this blue energy. And they call it the royal blue flame of protection, divinity, and of healing. And Osiris's heart was taken from him. Because there were beings that were jealous of his heart, of his spirituality, of his emotionality. So they tried to taint and stain the heart with negativity, greed, selfishness. And they tried to bring in pain to try to ruin the heart, poison it, break it, destroy it. And Osiris was quite marvelous at overcoming these tests from self-preserving beings that came in like inner enemies, trying to see if he is truly a heartfelt person. But he passed all these tests. But there's one test that near caused his heart to fragment out into these pieces scattered everywhere. And that is when the woman that he loved, that he surrendered his heart and soul to, betrayed him in the most awful, treacherous way. And she did it because she was not strong enough. She was attacked by the self-preserving beings and changed. They changed her. They made her believe in things about herself and about Osiris. So in that grief, he put his hand in his own chest and he ripped his heart out. And he crushed his heart with his powerful fists. And his heart became like these little particles. And the wind captured it and they all flew away into different directions. And he became a man with no heart, like the self-preserving man. And what happened is his rulership changed. He was no longer a leader of the heartfelt. He became a being who no longer connected to the earth through innocence and purity. He started to connect to the earth through many versions of perversion. His mind became quite perverted because the heart was not there to purify the mind with the sacred fire. He could not sense his direction. He had no spiritual compass. He had no emotional reason. He began to lose his way. Yes, he was a ruler of supposedly a golden age that had sophisticated technology and supreme knowledge, and yet there was no spiritual or emotional growth inside of him. He became this immortal, eternal being. But he did not have divinity within his soul. And he went on and on like this. He became this ruler of the underworld, as they call it, because his rulership got so dark and ignorant in his likings and dislikings. He could not see that his heart is his greatest guidance, his greatest teacher. His heart is his soul. And without it, he can be lost to illusions so dense, so convoluted, so entrapping. It's like a labyrinth that you just never seem to figure out. You can spend so much time there, wasting time. It's like a madhouse of delusion and insanity, thinking and thinking and not getting anywhere. He had no consciousness. All he had was just his wealth, his knowledge, and ignorance. So in his great devastation, when he began to realize the loss of his heart was the greatest mistake and regret, he began to fall into guilt, a deep guilt, where he was consumed with anger and resentment towards himself, where he was full of all the pain that he suppressed, that he threw away. And in his complete surrender to God, not the gods of his time that can be so false and self-preserving, he began to surrender to nature, to Mother Earth, to consciousness of a pure and innocent origin. And on his knees, with his forehead pressed to the earth, bowing to the innocence of a child within him, a beautiful being presented herself to him, a goddess among many goddesses that come from Sophia, which is the original goddess of all goddesses throughout all the lands of this planet Earth, a daughter of Sophia. And she came to Osiris as this archangel, like a beautiful dragonfly alongside Horus, the brown hawk. And she presented herself as this dragonfly. This beautiful creature of protection and of spirituality, divinity, and purity. And in the glimpse of this dragonfly, Osiris began to sense all the missing pieces of his heart scattered across this planet. He began to sense it, and he tried to pull it into his body, but his body was not the same. His body was like rotten. He was becoming rotten. His mind was so filled with this pollution of his own making that it's like his body was rotting, like he was a corpse. But he was alive, but he was in the underworld. He was not really alive. He had no energy because he had no heart. He had no energy. So this beautiful being, this goddess, this healer, this medicine woman from another dimension, from the place where he originates as a follower of Horus and the shiny ones who are the peacekeepers, guardians, and protectors of consciousness, pure consciousness, that is the flow of everything, the origin of everything, that place of unconditional love that he has split himself from and found himself in this duality, this polarization, and the power struggle that kept him hooked into this labyrinth of power struggle that would eventually cause him to be rotten, like a corpse, just diluting until he's washed out of all emotions, of all spirituality, turning him black. Black like a void with no creation, with no energy, with no light of love and creativity, imagination and wonder and life force. This dragonfly came to him, and this goddess said, I am your beloved, and I come to you now to help you retrieve your heart so that you may be a great leader and ruler of the underworld, not a slave to the underworld. So this dragonfly flew across the land and retrieved all little pieces of Osiris's heart, little pieces here stuck in a tree, and then in the ocean over here, and in the soil over there. This beautiful dragonfly, this goddess, gathered all these little pieces, thousands and thousands and thousands of these pieces of Osiris, all scattered everywhere, as he was this fragmented being, bound to his confusion and his void of himself. And she weaved him back together with her song. She weaved him back together with a song of women. And when she began to sing her song, a song of the goddesses, there were thousands of dragonflies that appeared around Osiris, each one of them with a little piece of Osiris's heart. And these thousands of dragonflies represented each a goddess. And they all came together just for Osiris to help him heal his heart. And he was in tears for the first time in thousands of years because he started to have emotions again, and spirituality and intuition and psychic gifts and creativity, that for the first time this spark was returned to him, this fire of passion and love and experience and transformation. And he wept and wept and wept because all of these goddesses came just for him, just to help him reawaken to his place of remembrance of who he truly is as consciousness, and knowing that consciousness well through the eyes of that unconditional love, the origin of his home throughout the cosmos. And when all these dragonflies began to whirl around him in their song, the song of Sophia, the earth. All the pieces were magnetically drawn together to form a heart, Osiris's heart, and it was brought back into his chest, and the pumping of the heart began to move blood back into his body, back into his bones, and this blood was the blood of the goddesses, the womb of the woman. And he began to feel the womb of his mother and mother's mother and mother's mother, all the way back to earth itself. And he began to purify his flesh, his rottenness, his void full of this emptiness of non-energy, this non-existence, this false eternity. And he began to raise himself into the rhythm of his soul's journey completion. He had rhythm again after thousands of years of having no rhythm, having no heartbeat, no divinity. Just thinking, with no peace. He was resurrected. He was resurrected by the followers of Horus, these goddesses that come from the stars, that heard his cry for help, for awakening, for love, and they came to protect him, to return him to his true nature. And in offering to the earth and to the goddesses for this help that saved him for thousands of years from eternity of being in this rotten self, this corpse of his life, a slave to this underworld, thinking, he became a judge to the underworld, a great protector and a great system of justice, where he would dedicate his energy, his newfound energy, to helping souls navigate through earth in different incarnations. And he became known as the person that weighs the heart against the scales of truth. When a person dies, they have a soul's journey with Osiris, where he checks their heart to make sure that they're in the rhythm of their soul's journey completion. And if they're not in rhythm, Osiris will initiate them, give them many tests to help them restore the balance within their own heart, so that they never live thousands of lifetimes, millions of lifetimes, this eternity of having no heart. So he would dedicate his life to helping souls check their own heart, make sure that their heart is light as a feather, so that they can always be in authenticity with unconditional love. And if not, they would experience immense transformation through their own karmic justice, paying off their karmic debt, so that they could clear and cleanse their heart. Because he began to understand on his journey back to the heart that it is the heart that decides our spiritual growth and decides who we are to become in our next life. And it also decides if we are real or not, if we are real or not, in order to keep the balance of this earth and all the souls that come here. He would check the rhythm. And if the rhythm was in sync with the earth and the soul's journey, these beings were free. And if not, they would be tested, not as a punishment or a curse, but as a system to help these beings purify, cleanse, and clear themselves of a heart that has been spoiled or rotten or fragmented. So on these tests, these people, these souls would have to retrieve these pieces of their heart. And they would have to weave these pieces back together into wholeness. And every initiation would be like going into a space where you would meet a piece of your heart, and you would have to transform it. You would have to learn how to accept that part of your heart, maybe heal it through forgiveness, through love. And some of these initiations were quite difficult for some people, because maybe they've gotten their heart taken away from them. Maybe they have forgotten their heart and died with a forgotten heart, and now must, in the afterlife, reawaken their heart so that they can be free. And he would do this for many souls, like a great guide. And though sometimes he is appearing quite scary in his underworld type of appearance, but it's a blessing in disguise. It's actually a system that can keep humans from living on and on and on and on without ever being judged, checked, without ever having a life review. One can split so far from the heart. The journey back is a lot more painful than the journey of Osiris in his underworld, in his afterlife, where we meet him in our life review. And we weigh our hearts, and we see our heart, and we get to see how in rhythm we are with our most natural consciousness, or how out of rhythm we are. And we get this blessing in disguise to reparent ourselves, to retrieve the fragments of ourselves, to become a whole being. And though these initiations towards becoming a whole being again, it's not the easiest. Eventually, through our completion of it and through our learning, we are grateful for Osiris and his many tests and initiations. We're grateful because without the check and balance, without the judge, to help us see our foolishness, to help us see how we're fragmented, how we're corpse, how we're not in energy, how we're off course, or how we're not being true to ourselves and what we really want to do in this life. We would never really know ourselves without that guidance, without that push back into ourselves. So this is the story of Osiris. It's quite a story for a mystic heart. But if you feel into your heart now, you can sense this is something very real indeed.